America was ablaze in the early 1970s, and it had nothing to do with the politics of Watergate or the Vietnam War. America was literally burning. Commercial and residential fires were epidemic, costing up to 8,000 lives annually and millions of dollars in property damage. A special presidential commission confronted the crisis in 1973. It issued a report called America Burning, which called for new strategies to both prevent and fight fires. One of the anxious readers of that study was Jim Ford, fresh out of Paradise Valley High School and a part-time firefighter for the Rural Metro Fire Department. The report would not only influence his career, it would place him on the forefront of a revolution. It began in 1975. Scottsdale was booming, congested, and emerging as an urban jobs center. The City Council passed an ordinance requiring fire suppression sprinklers in buildings over 7,500 square feet or with heights above 3 stories.
The policymakers understood if you're going to build in this community, you're adding risk to the community. That if you're going to do that, you're going to protect it with the best method we know, which is built-in automatic sprinkler protection.
The track record for automatic sprinklers was impressive, based on Rural Metro's local experience and reports from the National Fire Protection Association. Backed by that data, Rural Metro Fire Chief Lou Weitzman took an audacious step in 1982. He worked with an assortment of federal agencies and insurance companies to convince Womack Homes to put sprinklers in 2 residential models that were going up in Scottsdale. Weitzman's plan was to set fire to those sprinklered model homes. Ford, who had become a full-time fire captain, was manning the hoses that day.
Lou Weitzman pulled me aside and said, "Jim," he says, "your job today is to make sure these fires go out. We're going to light 10 fires in each one of these houses, and if these sprinklers don't work, then I have to buy these houses. So you guys better be good today."
Weitzman was so confident in the success of the test that he and Assistant Chief Ron Butler sat on sofas in the homes as fires were lit and began to grow right next to them. The sprinklers worked perfectly. Weitzman and Butler weren't even singed, and Weitzman kept his money. The smoke bellowing from the extinguished model homes that day signaled the next phase of revolution. Data again pointed the way. 4 out of 5 people dying in fires were in residential properties. Residential fires also represented about 70% of total property loss in the U.S.
We were doing pretty good on commercial businesses, but we weren't doing anything for residential. If it works out well in commercial, why won't it work in residential?
The City Council put together a committee that included Rural Metro Chiefs Bob Edwards and Frank Hodges, the city's building and water departments, local developers, and insurance companies. Their charge was to find a practical way to sprinkler residential homes.
You know, there's a lot of talk about coalitions nowadays and whether they work or not. It worked back then. People were willing to sit down and argue and talk and come up with a better method, and they did.
To offset higher building costs, the committee proposed easing some design requirements for developers. The proposals included increasing the space between hydrants, reducing the size of subdivision water mains, and shrinking the width of some streets. After more than 3 years of meetings, debate, and compromises, the City Council approved a proposal in 1985 that made Scottsdale the first city in the U.S. with a mandatory residential sprinkler ordinance for new structures.
Tonight, the Scottsdale City Council passed one of the most comprehensive fire prevention laws in the country, a law that requires sprinkler systems in every room of every office and home built in the city.
The move drew national headlines and heated commentary. The National Fire Protection Association called it a watershed event in fire prevention. Most developers, however, detested the move. They felt it added cost to their projects and placed Scottsdale at a competitive disadvantage over other communities. Detractors persisted, calling the ordinance costly and overly bureaucratic. Developers lobbied the City Council and legislature to overturn it. There was annual debate over whether residential sprinklers were needed or effective.
We were so far out on a limb that, you know, a lot of people were bailing off. They were saying, "Sorry, we're not staying with you." The city and the fire department were so far out. The fire chiefs that were trying to do the right thing and were going before their councils and going before their commissions and just getting killed with innuendo and misinformation.
Were residential sprinklers a wise investment or an overhyped boondoggle? Scottsdale had to find the answer. Ford would again play a pivotal role in the debate. 14 years after the model home demonstration and a decade after the Scottsdale ordinance adoption, he was tasked to compile a report to lay out the facts. Personally, Ford didn't need a study to know the value of residential sprinklers.
I've been on the calls where we've pulled people out of canals or we've pulled people and children out of homes. I've been on those calls. I went to every fire fatality and I went to every major incident we had. And then I was able to compare those to the incidents that we had that were sprinklered. And what a huge difference there was. We were able to show tremendous savings and tremendous less impact from the incidents.
He recounted one incident in a sprinklered home where a sleeping man was doused with gasoline by a roommate and lit on fire.
And that's a fatality anywhere in the country except in Scottsdale. He was in a sprinklered home. And the sprinkler system put him out and he saved his life, and he didn't even spend a night in the emergency room.
In the first 10 years of data analyzed by Ford, no death was reported by fire in a sprinklered building. At least 13 people were saved by sprinklers in the first 15 years of the ordinance who otherwise would have died in fires. During that same time frame, 13 people did die in Scottsdale fires. All were in non-sprinklered residential properties. Property savings were also significant. The average fire loss per sprinklered building was $2,166. The average fire loss per non-sprinklered incident was $45,019. Since the ordinance adoption, Scottsdale's total fire loss has been consistently about 1/3 of other comparable communities. Ford's study was published by the National Fire Protection Association, the Home Fire Sprinkler Coalition, and other professional groups. It validated the risk Scottsdale leaders took in 1985 by passing the sprinkler ordinance. The bottom line findings were impossible to argue. Lives spared, millions in property damage saved, and substantially less infrastructure cost to Scottsdale taxpayers. Ford, already a passionate advocate of residential sprinklers, became an international spokesperson for the city's approach to community risk reduction. He would travel to symposiums throughout North America, Europe, and other locations, spreading the Scottsdale way of fire prevention.
Now, we're a big city, and we get looked at and we get studied all the time. People come and look at us and they look at what we do and what we don't do. And I'm able to say, without a doubt, that this made a huge difference in how our community is protected.
From banning billboards to building the Indian Bend Wash Greenbelt, Scottsdale has a long history of innovation. Its early embrace of fire sprinklers, however, may be one of its most significant achievements. After all, how do you place a value on the dozens of lives that have been saved by sprinklers in Scottsdale? Just ask Geraldine Griffiths, manager of a Scottsdale residential care home that experienced an electrical fire in March 2018. 8 residents, several wheelchair-bound, were in the home. Sprinklers controlled the blaze before firefighters arrived to extinguish it and help with evacuations.
In my opinion, with the fuel load in there and the fuel load of the house, we would have definitely lost almost that entire structure, and we most likely would have had fire fatalities in this structure if it wouldn't have been for that sprinkler system that controlled and contained that fire until our units could get there.
As it was, Griffiths said many of the residents weren't even aware of the fire as they were being evacuated. And because of the limited damage, residents were back home after only 3 days.
I will thank all those people who pushed this project to have a fire sprinklers in their house, because I just couldn't imagine if without these sprinklers what would happen in this care home.
Scottsdale's elected officials have also held steadfast, refusing to reduce or remove the requirement for residential sprinklers in new structures.
Well, the difference that it's made in our community is one of those things that just amounts to public safety. The sprinkler systems for residential homes obviously was a relatively, in fact, I think entirely new invention for the communities here in the state and maybe across the country.
Today, Scottsdale continues to be a national leader in fire sprinkler safety, and attempts continue to roll back that protection. A bill forbidding cities from enacting residential sprinkler requirements was defeated in the 2018 legislative session.
Today, there's still communities that this is still a raging battle, whether or not to do this or not. And so they don't even look at us anymore because they say, well, we know that you're not going to change, leave it alone, leave Scottsdale alone, but you're different. well, yeah, we're different because we did it right.